Good evening, everyone. Hi. My name is Regina Gasicki. I'm an assistant director at the Gender Relations Center. We're really excited tonight to present with our co-sponsors, the Department of Sociology and Campus Ministry. I need to read off the title, it's very long. Ring by Spring, Hooking Up, Opting Out, Redefining, Notre Dating. So we have a distinguished panel assembled here, but before we introduce them, I just want to kind of give you an overview of what we're trying to discuss and think about tonight. So I gave the panelists a couple questions beforehand, and I'll share them with you so you know where we're going. So do you think the three categories, ring by spring or pseudo-married, college marriage, all these different ways that we call it, hooking up or opting out outlined in the title of the event are accurate in describing the relationships that we see here at ND? And if so, why might these extremes exist? What factors might influence choices that people make around dating? Do values and faith play into the decisions that they make or they don't make in terms of their relationships? And what advice can be offered on how to develop a diversity of relationships that are going to help students be happy and healthy during college and then beyond? So that's kind of what we're trying to think through tonight. And I'll let Bianca, one of our Gender Relations Center student leaders right here, introduce our panel. So.
All right, so on my far right, your guys' far left, we have Professor Christian Smith. He's the William R. Keenan Jr. Professor of Sociology at Notre Dame. He's also the Director of the Center for Study of Religion and Society, Director of the Notre Dame Center for Social Research, Principal Investigator of the National Study of Youth and Religion, and also the Principal Investigator of the Science and Generosity Initiative. Smith is the author, co-author, and editor of numerous books. Some of these include Lost in Transition, The Dark Side of Emerging Adulthood, What is a Person? Rethinking Humanity, Social Life, and the Moral Good from the Person Up, and Soul Searching, The Religious and Spiritual Lives of American Teenagers, among many others. Next we have Professor Jessica Collett. She's been at Notre Dame for the last 8 years, and she researches in a variety of topics from emotions to families to religiosity to students. And uniting these diverse interests is a desire to understand how our identities and perceptions of self are shaped by the groups we belong to and the interactions that we have with other people. She's the director of graduate studies in the sociology department, but regularly teaches undergraduate courses, including Introduction to Social Psychology, the social construction of difference and inequality, and the socialization and the life. She also recently published the 8th edition of a popular textbook, Social Psychology, with Dan Myers, who is the vice president and associate provost here at Notre Dame. Next we have Faisal Sharif. He is a sophomore science, business, and economics double major with a poverty studies minor. Originally from Granger, he now resides in Duncan Hall, and he is the Gender Relations Center dorm commissioner and the Duncan Man-Hour assistant commissioner. And he's also the vice president of the Muslim Student Association at ND and is involved with the Center for Rare and Neglected Diseases on campus. And I did realize I went out of order, I'm sorry. And last we have Nora Williamson, who is a junior marketing major living in Pascagoula West Hall. She grew up in St. Louis, Missouri and attended an all-girls Catholic high school. Her on-campus jobs include being a teaching assistant for principals of marketing and working at the phone center as a student caller. She's also a fire starter with the Gender Relations Center. In her free time, she says she likes to attend lectures like the ones you're at right now, and she enjoys listening to urban alternative music.
Thank you, Bianca. So I'd like to start a discussion by turning it over to our students here and letting them open up with kind of their take on this whole topic and their experience here at ND. Go for it.
Start. Well, to be honest, I've only been here for 1 year, but I've had some good experiences in terms of dating. I haven't formally had a girlfriend here, but I have, the way I look at it, it's not that I'm going into it trying to find a romantic relationship with every girl that I talk to. I try to get to know them better, trying to, hang out with them, and I'm not in it just for the romantic relationship. I'm really in it to kind of form friendships and then go on from there. I think that's what's important to me, and I think that's what should be important to a lot of people, that the focus should not be on just, hooking up or releasing sexual tension, etc. It should be on forming lasting relationships, I feel. What do you think?
Well, I guess in my own experience in terms of anything, whether you're, that I've noticed around on campus, is that people need to remember communication is key in any type of relationship. I've heard just people, oh, I wonder if my boyfriend thinks this, or if my girlfriend thinks this, and I'm like, why don't you just ask them? So I think communication is also very important. And then in terms of friends who I've seen who have like lasting relationships, these are the people who are kind of college married, who've been dating since freshman year, and like, everyone thinks they're gonna get married, is they always have a good group of outside friends as well, and they aren't necessarily up under their boyfriend or girlfriend all the time.
We go ahead with professors next.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think that was a great introduction to kind of the end of what I was going to say. So I prepared a few comments, but I'm so heartened to hear what the students have to say, because I think that it relates to the advice portion that Regina asked us to prepare for tonight. So I'm going to start, because I am a sociology professor, about, just introducing, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, just introducing some of what we know as social scientists and what I know or think I know as a professor here at Notre Dame about hooking up and dating and relationships and such. So I want to start by saying that, with the title of the talk, or the title of this panel, is it ring by spring, hooking up, opting out? Definitely hooking up is an important part of the Notre Dame culture, but I'm going to argue that it's actually not as prevalent here as it is on other college campuses, and that's for two reasons. So the first one is at most college campuses, women significantly outnumber men, 2 or 3 to 1. And that, because there are less men for all of those women, puts kind of men in control of the way that that romance occurs on campus, romance perhaps in quotes. With lots of women vying for men's attention, really men get to call the shots. And generally men are thought to, they're less likely to desire settling down than women. And I want to be clear that I'm not arguing an evolutionary thing, I'm not arguing something that's biological. It could be due to cultural and social norms. It's just that women tend to value kind of romance and relationships and settling down earlier than men do. But if men have control of this college dating market, like they do in these schools where the women outnumber them so significantly, then the hooking up culture tends to be quite prevalent. And we don't have that here. Actually, we have almost equal numbers of men and women, with just slightly more men. And so that creates a situation where it's possible to actually have a viable ring by spring or even just normal dating. You don't have to be college married. It just makes it a lot easier for us to think outside of the hooking up box. Second, ring by spring remains this part of Notre Dame culture that does combat the overwhelming desire to have hookup take over. And that's in part because there's this long history of the ring by spring culture here. So many of the students that I've taught over the years are legacy students. At least one or both of their parents went to Notre Dame. And many of those parents met here at Notre Dame. And when it comes to relationships, we tend to often follow our parents' trajectories. So it makes sense that this kind of ring by spring idea, meeting your partner, lives on our campus. And so that's one of the things that kind of helps ring by spring stay there and not have hooking up take over. Furthermore, most marriages occur between people who are similar on race, religion, education, or social class. And what Notre Dame has done is put together a lot of very similar people, especially if you're white, upper class, Catholic, any of those kinds of things. And so this is a marriage market where it makes sense for people to connect. And that, once again, creates this sense that the people who you meet here might be the people who you would marry. Importantly, though, the demographics that we have at Notre Dame don't just suppress the hooking up culture, but they also could potentially exacerbate it. Hooking up is not something that all college-aged people do. In fact, we find that it's more common among the middle and upper classes than it is among poor and working class students. And this is in part because there's this class idea among the middle and upper classes that you go to college for this kind of, and Chris can probably talk about this even better than I can, for this self-discovery. You come to college to kind of figure out who you are, to pursue your personal and professional passions. Having a relationship on campus is going to get in the way of you pursuing these educational goals and pursuits. And so because women in this privileged class don't want to settle down and they don't want to sacrifice that, they're in a bind because they have that kind of class expectation, but they have this gendered expectations that they want romance, they want relationships, they want marriage. And so hooking up is a way for college-age women to sort of get past that double bind. You can have this, once again, romance in quotes or relationships, those kinds of things, without necessarily investing all of your time into a relationship. So hooking up lets these college-age women pursue some type of feminized goals without sacrificing their personal or professional priorities. If I had a piece of advice for students, and I know it's easier said than done, and this is where I'm getting back to what the students said, it would be to remember that it's okay to make it up as you go along. So as a social psychologist, I understand the desire for scripts. There are these schemas about how the world works. And so simply knowing if this is just a hookup or if this is something more, if this is a date, whatever this is, it helps us figure out how to move forward with some relative certainty about what happens next. And so even if it's not what we want, even if we don't want hooking up, just knowing that this is hooking up lets us know what's around the corner, what comes next, what to expect. And you need to bear with me on the following example, but there's this famous argument in sociology about the popularity of McDonald's. And they say that McDonald's is popular not because it offers the best burger that people have ever had, but because it offers the same burger that people have always had. And so regardless of whatever McDonald's I walk into, I can expect the menu to be relatively similar and the burger to taste exactly the same. And so McDonald's is so successful in part because we will sometimes compromise taste or what we desire to lessen our uncertainty about what's ahead. That's okay. You can eat at McDonald's if you'd like. But if it's not a hookup that you want or ring by spring, it's okay to ask for something that's not on the menu. Okay, so it feels good to be able to go into McDonald's and say, this is what I want, and know exactly what you're gonna get. Just like, maybe there's some comfort in saying, okay, this is just a hookup, and knowing what to expect. But that might not be what you want. And so to take the burger metaphor further, and this is, my 15-year-old son is dying even though he's not here. Know that you have the power to create something akin to In-N-Out's not-so-secret menu, okay? So this is going to bring up all sorts of unfortunate terms to relate to dating and relationships. Animal style, double meat, 3x3, wish burger. But I hope that you get the picture. Just remember that it's ultimately, it's in interaction with one other person that you figure out what this is or where this is going. Be explicit about what you want and desire. This is really similar to what Faisal was saying earlier. You can even be explicit that you don't know what you want. You don't have to have it all figured out. So if you don't feel comfortable talking with somebody about these things, if you don't want to have this conversation, that might not be the best person for you to pursue. And remember that you don't need to have it all figured out, that you just need to achieve what we in social psychology call a working consensus. It's just what is going on right now, and you can check back in later. So I want to close my comments with a quick anecdote about this. A couple years after I arrived on campus, one of my students wrote a letter to the editor, and the title was The Hookup Culture, and the first line was, "Dear 6 guys who I hooked up with this semester." This first-year student basically laid down the law in this letter to the editor, and she said that she was finished hooking up. I'm sure it was very scary for her. It was not easy. I don't recommend you write a letter to the editor or a column or something if this is your view. But what she did is she got people talking. And her letter, this declaration of what she didn't want, did not doom her to a life of loneliness. Instead, when she met the guy who she ultimately ended up marrying, he knew, because she proclaimed to the entire campus, exactly where she stood, exactly what she wanted. And that was a great place to start, to have a discussion about what non-hooking up option she wanted to pursue. So even without a column or a letter to the editor, just remember that you too have the power to define what it is you want, and to do that, in dialogue with somebody. And it can be scary to work off script. It can be scary to go in and order something that's not on the menu, but it is easier than it seems. And so that's my advice to you.
Well, the faculty are doing a lot more talking than the students so far, but I'll say a few words and then bounce it back down to the end of the table. I loved what you had to say. One qualification on the ratio of men to women at Notre Dame. I've had students insist to me that the fact that St. Mary's College is right across the road throws off the female to male demographic ratio. But I think it's helpful to put all this in context. So we're both sociologists, and sociologists try to understand the particular by understanding the general, understand our personal histories and experiences by setting it in larger social context. One thing that may be obvious, but that's important to put all this into context, is that the traditional dating system was invented and had its golden era, so to speak, when people were, in some sense unusually in the United States, marrying pretty young, out of high school and out of college. And so dating was pretty closely connected to finishing school and being married to somebody. What's happened since the 60s is that the average age of first marriage in this country has been extended by about 6 years. And there are still people marrying out of high school, so that means to compensate for them, there's somebody else who's waiting till they're 35 to get married. So basically what it means is you all have been born into a world where it's normative, especially in your social class that most of you probably come from, it's normative that you're just not going to get married for a long time. If you ever get married, it's not going to be for a long time. And some of you may want to get married soon, but you can't control the rest of the world around you, the culture, and other people's expectations. So that creates this very long, stretched out sort of limbo land, which is, I think, what has the structural conditions that have created this whole idea of, well, if you're not dating to seriously determine if you want to spend your life with this person, what are you doing? Well, then you have everything else. You have hooking up, you have joined at the hip, hanging out, fuck buddy, whatever it is. There's this whole menu of things that have developed to try to deal with the fact, I'm an adult, I've been pubescent for 8 years, whatever it is. I have needs and interests, relational and otherwise, but I'm not going to be married for a long time. And so that's the context in which this problem, if you view it as a problem, arises, or these opportunities, if you view them as opportunities, arises. How do you have serious adultish-like relationships when it's all being done in this limbo land, this long stretch of time? I think it's just helpful to understand, oh, that's the context we're in, and that helps to explain how things turned out to be what they are. I have more to say, but I don't want to keep talking for too long, so let's just keep going around here.
I mean, that does make sense when you talk about hookup culture and people, are just kind of comfortable in it, but also, I know a lot of people who do want a relationship, but they end up hooking up with someone and just hoping, oh, maybe he'll call or maybe she'll call. And it's just hard because people need to communicate with each other and be honest about, this is what I'm looking for, this isn't what I'm looking for. And it's really hard, to be with some friends sometimes. It's oh, maybe that's why he's not calling me back, he only wanted to hang out once, things like that.
Yeah, I would argue that the two of the three options are actually interconnected. I would say that opting out and hooking up are interrelated, actually, that people who opt out are actually opting out of actual dating and turning towards hookups as an escape. They are either sometimes they don't have time. I mean, everyone has time. Their excuse is that they don't have time for a relationship, or they might not be interested in a relationship right now because they might have just gotten out of a relationship, or they're focused on their studies or something along those lines. So the thing is, they still want some escape, some sort of romantic, I guess, some out, and they turn towards hooking up for that. I believe that it's just an easy out. And another thing that's related to this is the idea of just talking. A lot of times there's this limbo, or I'm not sure if I'm using this in the right context, but there's this point in a relationship between two significant others where you've introduced yourselves, you've gotten to know each other, and you're at that awkward position where you're not yet dating, but you're talking. And so I really feel that that's one of the biggest issues, that you shouldn't necessarily be talking. If you're interested in a relationship, I think that one of the significant others should take that initiative, should take that step. If they should think about it, they should think about their feelings, think about the other person. If I like this person, then I should try and take them on a date, take that leap. And then personally, this is one of my opinions. So as a boy, if I have the courage to go up to a girl and ask her out, to ask her on a date, first of all, think about whether I like this girl, getting to know her initially in the first stages and stuff like that. Then taking that leap to, oh yes, I am interested, I want to take her on a date. I think that and I think this might be controversial, but I think that the girl also has some responsibility, take that leap of faith as well, to, give it a try. I think that you should give it a try and give more guys a chance.
Can I ask a question for clarification? Could you define your perspective of what hooking up is? So I come to understand at Notre Dame that hooking up can either be meeting someone at a party and having sexual intercourse with them, or hooking up could be kissing someone on the dance floor at the Paul S. My Art. And so can you clarify whether that is both, or and maybe how prevalent one may be more over the other?
I think both for sure, because either way, it was some kind of contact with someone who isn't your boyfriend or girlfriend. So I think it can mean both, and both can have kind of the same effect. Again, because I've had people, oh, I made out with him, he hasn't called me, or oh, I've had sex with him and he hasn't called me. To me, it can have the same effect. So yeah, I think both. Would you say both too?
Yeah, I would say the definition of hookup at Notre Dame, maybe even other places, is anywhere from kissing or making out to having sex. I think it's very broad. It depends on who you're talking to. Yeah, it's very vague.
This is actually related to something that I do in my Intro to Social Psych class when I talk about scripts or schemas like I introduced earlier. And I ask students a variety of multiple choice questions about hooking up. And so the first one is like, who is it who hooks up? And then is it like two people who really know each other well, all the way down to strangers? And what emerges is like this very sort of clear thing that is people who kind of know each other, right? Like kind of acquaintances. It's not somebody who you're seeing for the first time generally. And then I say, where does hooking up happen? And I give a list of things, and people say it happens at a party or it happens in boys' dorms, okay? And then I say, okay, there's widespread agreement on that. And then I say, okay, so what's normally happening? And drinking, widespread agreement. That is like the number one thing from the list that people choose, widespread agreement. And then I say, okay, but what is hooking up where does the hookup happen? It's usually in a guy's dorm or like in the guy's room somewhere, right? And then I say, okay, so what is hooking up? And here, it's like 25% think it's like heavily making out, and 25% think that, it's like oral sex, and 25% think that it's, sexual intercourse. I mean, it just gets spread out really evenly. People don't know that part. Like, there's general agreement about everything else, kind of the context that it happens in. But when you're at the dining hall and your friend says, oh, so-and-so hooked up, you don't say like, well, what do you mean by hooked up, right? And so we just have not created a widespread agreement about what exactly we mean when we say it. So that's totally, yeah.
Well, I actually think it's part of the term is intentionally ambiguous. It's not a clarified term, and that's part of what the meaning of the thing is. It's to have that ambiguity running in the conversation, and to have an open-endedness even as something is happening. I think that's just intrinsic part of what the whole concept is.
I agree. I think that the reason why it is so ambiguous is because they themselves are not sure. They don't know what they want. They don't know what it is. That's why they call it a hookup. They try to define it with something broadly. That's why they try to put it underneath that. That's why they turn to hooking up, because they don't know whether they want to date someone or whether they're just friends.
And from some guy's point of view, they can suggest to their friends that something happened without having to specify what did or didn't happen, and maybe be more impressive than they actually are to their friends.
One
So
thing,
would you say that this is more for something that's experienced at Notre Dame, or if your studies have found that it's also something just overarching for all young adults?
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. I do think, I mean, I add a joke question to that survey because I've heard that the Notre Dame hookup is like holding hands, like walking around the lake or whatever. And so I add that question, right? But I mean, I would say that we do have more people who think like, and I think maybe you were, when you said kind of a kiss on the SYR dance floor, like I'm not sure how many people would think that, but I think we do kind of tend towards the more benign end of the spectrum sometimes compared to other places, but definitely the ambiguity is widely shared.
one thing that I wanted to comment on was alcohol. I think that's a big thing that at these dorm parties and these drunk hookups, I think that personally, my advice and my belief is that they're not very meaningful. That we should try to have meaningful relationships. We shouldn't go out on a Friday night with the intention of hooking up just because it's fun. We should go out trying to, and even if you go to a dorm party, you can get to know someone. You can talk to them. It's not like just because you go to a dorm party, you have to hook up with someone. I think that alcohol is a big thing, that people turn to alcohol, again, because they don't want to, they don't want to, it's hard for them to build up the courage. I think they call it liquid courage, as the, I guess, colloquial term for it. So they try to turn to alcohol in order to give them the courage to go up to a girl, whereas that's meaningless, I feel. That if you need alcohol to go up to your significant other or someone that you're interested in, I think that shouldn't, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what you're trying to go for. If you are interested in a person, you should be able to think about these feelings and like acknowledge those feelings within yourself, and then make the initiative and take the step to go and talk to them. I think that without alcohol, while still being in your right mind.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, alcohol is, yeah.
The way Henri Venter would put it, it's a social lubricant.
There are a lot of people, there are a lot of college students around the country. I know more about the national scene than Notre Dame particularly, but there are a lot of college students who do things that they're not personally all that interested in, but they believe, they have the perception that this is what is real, this is what you have to do. It actually is not as real on college campuses as many perceive it to be. There are a lot of people that don't hook up and don't drink their brains out, but the dominant perception is that this is the standard. And there's enough anxiety about social acceptance that people are willing to do things or get sucked into things that they actually don't even really want themselves, but they just feel like you're supposed to, and B, if I don't, I will be completely thrown out as a social isolate. So this brings me back to one of the last things Professor Collett said, which is, I think it's really important for people to know what they want and to have enough courage to say, if I stick up for that, I'll be okay in life, and maybe people respect me even more, and to communicate to others, here's actually what I want, not that, I want this. And to, in some ways, I should think that'd be a lot more attractive to peers, but I've interviewed lots and lots of young women, especially, who think they're having fun in hookup culture, but they're not really having fun. And in the end, they realize these rules are not written on my behalf. They're not doing anything that accomplishes what I want to be done in the world. And yet, they couldn't imagine how they could resist it. So I think there's a certain amount of being clear about what one really wants, honest about what one wants oneself, even if that doesn't seem to go along with the dominant norm. And to be courageous enough to say, I'm going to stick to my guns on that, so to speak.
What role do you think, I know this is like off, mentioned,
My general approach to social media is it's not as bad as a lot of people think it is, but it's worse than some people think it is. So it's moderately a problem. That's my general approach. It's not demonic and it's not benign. Before social media, there was bragging. I mean, there were ways to present oneself in a way, but it was sort of verbal bragging, etc. I do think that there are burdens on, and I know somebody who's researching this, that there are burdens of identity, that people feel sort of a schizophrenia between their public identity on social media and their real identity as themselves. And and it's hard to imagine everyone else isn't really who they're portraying themselves to be on social media. And so that creates this sort of disconnect of the real self to public presentation that creates a certain amount of anxiety and so on. So to say all that very simply, yeah, I think social media feeds into this problem. I think people think, oh my gosh, look what's happening everywhere, and da-da-da. Real life is always more complicated and nuanced and ambivalent about things than usually what gets the picture that gets sent out. That's my view. I could be wrong, but that's my view.
One thing, and I don't know if it's really social media, and I've never used it, so I could be completely wrong about this, but I think about the way that we meet people sometimes. So it's not so much like, am I sort of like Facebook friends or Twitter, or do I share like an do they see my Instagram or whatever. But this Tinder thing, you know, it's like where...
You've never used it? Come on.
I mean, so I actually use this app called Lulu. I don't actually use it, but I went on it to like see how it worked because I'm a sociologist and it was research and everything. And but I think I can't do that on Tinder. I haven't figured out yet how to do that without like all of a sudden having people who could say if they liked me or not. And I think that things like that definitely, you know, it's basically meant to just connect people who are in a similar area and, you know, like who kind of think that one another are physically attractive. And I don't know what that means for how you meet people. I mean, research does show that we're more likely to form lasting relationships with people who we meet through our social networks and at places like schools and church and workplaces and things like that. And so if you're just meeting some random Joe or Jane or whatever on Tinder, like, I don't know what that means. I think it does kind of fuel this mentality that relationships are fleeting or something. But that's not really social media as much as, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
What about your does you think that social media presence or at least being on their phone constantly or their tablet or whatever affects the climate that you see?
It definitely plays a role. So the first time you said social media made me think of indie makeouts. So I think most of the students are familiar with that. Do you know about indie makeouts? Okay, well there's a Twitter page where people, and I think it's actually part of it's kind of illegal because you're taking pictures of people making out and then putting them online. I'm pretty sure that's legal without their permission. But if you get on the Twitter page, there's like pictures of a bunch of people making out like randomly at parties or hip hop night, which is a big invasion of privacy. Like, just I don't get on there because I don't like to see that. So it makes me think of that, but also I think about when you're interested in someone, the first thing you do is you add them on Facebook, or you try to stalk their Facebook without adding them, and you want to find out if they're in a relationship, or like look at his pictures, or also like, you know, if you're seeing someone, but you're at that awkward interim, it's like, oh, he posted a picture with another girl, like who's that? You go stalk her, whereas like before Facebook and Instagram and things like that, you just had to find out about people the old-fashioned way. So, which I deleted my Facebook, so I don't have those problems anymore. But yeah, it's like a big thing. Like, let me check his Facebook. So.
I would agree. She put it pretty well. There is definitely a lot of Facebook stalking going on.
I mean, I've done it before. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
You know, everyone's guilty. You try. It's almost like your personal investigator. Like you go and like figure out what's going on with this guy, whether he played sports in high school or, you know, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of like, I think it discourages. And then the funny thing is, like, when you find out something about someone on Facebook, and then like you're asking them about it in real life, And then you kind of have to like act like you didn't know, like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that you ran cross country in high school. Like,
I didn't know your siblings' names.
like, so I think that it discourages the initial conversation and trying to get to know each other and stuff like that. That you shouldn't try and find out things about a person that you're interested in, or I mean, to anyone to be that for that matter, by going on Facebook. I think that you should try and get to know them in person. Try to ask questions. Try to form real relationships. By small talk is in the beginning, but you will get to know a person just because you think it's awkward. It'll get better. It doesn't mean that you should turn to Facebook.
Another social context factor, particularly in a Notre Dame, that I think is worth saying, even though it's saying the obvious, is the nature of the geographic setting here and the campus is such that there isn't a lot of obvious dating things to do. Like if you wanted to engage in traditional dating, you wouldn't say, can I take you to dinner at North Dining Hall? Doesn't make any sense. Or let's go sit by Stonehenge. I mean, in some ways, all of life is here and all together. There's nothing special. You could go to South Bend Chocolate Company in South Bend, but if you think about, say, what if you went to New York University? I mean, there's concerts and a bazillion things that is missing here. There's just nothing particularly special to do here, even though the campus is fantastic. Nothing special when it comes to dating. Maybe, oh, there's a performance at DPAC. But there's a relative lack of those things. So even if somebody was interested, you're sort of behind the 8 ball already in like imagining what would be a good thing to propose that isn't totally stupid or what?
Yeah. I think this is related to what Nora was saying too about those ND makeouts that I had never heard of before. It's like if you take advantage of these things on campus, you still feel like you're under this microscope. And if I'm doing something that's out of the norm, or what if people think that this is what my grandma did and not what college students do today or something, that there's this sense that when you're on campus, everybody is watching what you're doing and who you're talking to and trying to like gauge the relationship. So it's not just something you're worried about, but you're worried everybody else is thinking about it. So the bubble can feel constraining, not just because it offers limited options, but because you feel like you're constantly under surveillance from your peers and you don't want to do anything that makes you not socially accepted.
I agree that there is a limited, being from the South Bend area, there's a limited amount of options in terms of, I guess, formal dating, if you were to define it that way, in terms of concerts, etc., and I mean fancy restaurants. But I think that it's a matter of perspective on what a date is, if you were to define a date. I think that, maybe we need to redefine is that, take a girl paintballing, this is something example that I threw out. I don't know. It'd be cool. I don't know. I would personally try it. But you could just, it doesn't have to be take a girl on a dinner date. It doesn't have to be, oh, let's go to a movie. Think about stuff that you like, and try to do it with the person that you're interested in. Like play a sport. Go to I guess there's a lot of cool stuff on campus. It's like acoustic cafe. Like these aren't necessarily formal dates, but you can take people to these things, go to them with people, and get to know them and have fun. I think that we should, think outside the box. And personally, I think the guys need to step up. Like we gotta get more creative here. Frankie.
Put it out there. There's a mini putt-putt course like just north of campus. Perfect date scenario.
No, seriously, like even if you weren't to take someone to the mini putt-putt course, you could take her out to the practice green and like have a contest. I don't know, and I don't know. It's a lame idea. Sorry.
Do students go out in groups? I mean, that's another way that's kind of like to get off campus, to do something that allows you time to kind of hang out with the person that you're interested in, but not all of the pressure of kind of one-on-one? Or is that something that people don't do?
I feel like it's more on campus. Like I had a party the other night in PIA, and I had maybe 10 people in the room, guys and girls, but I feel like it's mostly on campus. I do have a car, so I go off campus sometimes. Actually, I go off campus alone. Never mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I think going like off campus I think is hard because you have to, like it's hard to get off campus, like you have to walk so far to get your car and then to coordinate like who's going out with who, and then like if there is sort of this like romantic, like if you're trying to go out in a group but there's someone you're interested in within that group, then it's like, are you sitting next to each other? Are you sitting in this car with them?
Yeah.
Like who's going, like what's the dynamic? Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows, like so I think that makes it hard to go off campus like in groups. If it's not just like a within your
since nobody's saying anything, I'll throw something else in. I know this from studying teenagers and emerging adults all over the place, that this is repeating what I said before in another vein. The dominant culture for what it means to be a guy involves sort of invulnerability. I mean, we know this, being strong, being relatively invulnerable, in this kind of context of this discussion, scoring with women a lot, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is that guys actually have the identical needs as women to be, to just have people know them, to understand them, to have some affection, to be able to process their emotions, to be able to talk about things that are bothering them. There's not a lot in the culture that sort of empowers guys to do that. And so a lot of young men just have their feelings paved over, basically. And that feeds into some of the troubles that get going. So that's just to sort of call out, and maybe this is a message for women, is don't take guys at face value. If they come across as something, there's a lot more depth to guys than what the dominant culture authorizes them to project about themselves. And if you build real relationships with them, you will find out guys are just as complex and emotionally needy and everything else as women. They're just in the 70s when I was a kid, we would have said they were retarded, but we're not allowed to say that anymore. So I'm at a loss for words. Emotionally, the culture doesn't.
Emotionally stunted.
Stunted. Sorry for my. But I think it's important to recognize and to put out there. You know, guys are complex people too, even if they don't know it.
I feel like there's also a lot of pressure on masculinity in general to be the ones asserting in a relationship. Like even in the language that we're using right now to discuss the dating culture, like the guy is the one that takes the girl on a date, or the guy is the one that asks the girl out. Whereas really it should be more of a balance. I feel like if it's going to be a more healthy relationship.
Depends. I don't know. I'm kind of a traditional person, just like personally. So I would be that person who expects guys to do expect my future husband to do certain things. But I know that each relationship is different. So I know when you talk about that balance, so some people would expect that balance more so than having like a dominant person. That's a good point.
I totally agree. I'm really glad that you brought that point up. I think that, as much as I have been talking in the terms that you mentioned, I think that girls should as well try to, ask guys on out on dates, etc. That, it shouldn't be one-sided. It should be balanced. Just because the convention is for a guy to ask a girl on a date doesn't necessarily mean that has to happen. Girls should take the leap of faith as well. If you're interested in a guy, I've heard this from a lot of my friends that they're like, oh, this guy won't ask me out, this guy won't ask me out. Then just take the initiative. It's okay to be the first one to take that step. If you're interested in a person, you don't need to keep dropping hints, expecting or like trying to wait for him to, you know what I mean.
Yeah, while we're talking about balance, I think females expect males to be as concerned about these topics as they are. And I think it says a lot that at this point, we're predominantly female. So my question is, do you believe that males have the same concern, that they also believe that or are they as cognizant of the fact that there are gender relations problems or issues on this campus, and do they care?
Did I make a shout out to my Duncan boys who are here?
Would you have comments if it wasn't your friend here?
Of course.
I actually counted the heads of men and women.
Okay, I'll comment. I think that in terms of the complexity, and you're asking whether guys actually think about as much about relationships and about girls and complexity and emotions as much as girls. Is that what your question is? I'm just trying to confirm. You can restate it.
That's more or less my question, yes.
Is there anything specific that you want me to address? Okay, I think that a lot think that they try not to acknowledge it. But at the same time, I think that, we underestimate the amount of guys that do think about those things, the amount of guys that are complex. I mean, everyone is complex. The amount of guys that acknowledge their emotions and stuff like that and really think about them and talk about them with other people, that they do exist. They're not some sort of myth. What else to say?
I'm certain there are plenty of male students on this campus who are very interested in these issues, who probably think that to come to this event tonight would be a little weird, a little threatening if they're seemingly having it all together, knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, to comment on that.
Except for these guys, they're totally secure in their masculinity.
He's absolutely correct. I think someone mentioned the fact that masculinity, you need to be sure about yourself, that you need to, really have confidence, and you need to be the one to take the initiative. A lot of guys are afraid of asking for help in terms with girls and stuff like that. They think that, I should be on my own, that I should be able to do this by myself. It's one of those things that, I have to be manly about. That they're afraid to, talk about these things, and they need to realize that it's not all about being manly and macho, that everyone has these problems, that it's not bad to acknowledge them, address them, to talk about them. With guys or with girls, it doesn't matter. You just need to, acknowledge them and address them.
I think also because the hookup culture and sort of like a variety of short-lived relationships with a sort of number of different partners that's supposedly connected to, that's consistent with these kinds of ideas about masculinity that are common in popular culture. And so these ideas, that we're hearing from the panel, that men feel like, oh, maybe this is actually like to have a problem with this is saying that I don't buy into what it means to be a man today. And so even if they don't, then they're scared to show that, or don't want to express some kind of problem with traditional masculine, where the more people you're with, the more slutty you are. Whereas women are concerned about it because the more people you're with, the more slutty you're perceived to be. And so, there are gendered issues that make this a gendered issue.
To give you a personal take on this, a lot of my friends have talked about dating with me and stuff like that, and they are worried about girls. And sometimes they might have just been getting out of a relationship, and they don't want to, talk to girls, or they don't want to try and start dating another girl just because they got out of one, or they're like, oh, I'm not looking for a relationship now. I just want to, kind of hook up with girls, or and sometimes they're like, oh, no girl has caught my eye, or like, are there any girls here for me? I think that these problems, these things are definitely on the guys' minds. That it's not just the females that are thinking about this.
One question. Based on your experience with both as professors and the students and friends, I'm a junior and I'm hearing all the stories from freshmen coming in saying, my mom or my dad put me on birth control because they didn't know if I was going to be sexually active, so they just wanted to prevent the cause. How much do you think, as more of the freshman community coming in, hitting up donor fest and meeting older guys, and that kind of hookup culture is dependent on what their parents may or may not have asked them before they came to college? How much of it is their friends' opinions, and how that contributes to their decision making?
That's a great point. I mean, well, when it comes to like, you mentioned like parents putting their kids on birth control, I mean, that's a per household thing. People decide how to raise their kids. And of course, I hope everybody has had the talk before they hit puberty, things like that. But I feel like with some freshmen and I'm not getting freshmen, there was some freshmen that's kind of like, oh, it's college, it's hookup culture, that's what I'm supposed to do. So when they do meet, upperclassmen and hook up, it's like, oh, that's what we're supposed to do as college. And I mean, if you're comfortable hooking up, that's fine. But again, as we talked about earlier, if you're not comfortable doing that, then you shouldn't. So, I mean, it really all depends. Because I've met lots of people who are like, oh, it's my freshman year, I don't want a relationship, I'm just gonna, play the field, whatever. And again, I think as long as you're honest with the people that you're with, that, that everybody understands what's going on, and that's not a problem. But yeah, no, that is a really important point though.
I have a question. Do you think it's because we're a Catholic university that things are different from other colleges, or because we have rules such as DULA that makes us different from other colleges?
Which rules? You mean like varietals? You mean a rule like that?
Yeah, varietals.
people break varietals. We all know people break varietals. But of course, I know you can do it at night, you can do it during the day. But I feel like it does that we go to Catholic University, and also if you go to, like, I go to Mass every Sunday, and it's always full, you know, so there are a lot of people who are active in their faith, so I think that does play a role in people's decisions. Yeah, I don't know what you say.
In terms of varietals, I don't necessarily like she said, that what you can do during the night, you can do during the day. I don't think they're necessarily stopping us from having meaningful relationships. Maybe people amplify what are people like, you know, just because varietals are there, they think that they can't do certain things. I think that they see them as obstacles and stuff like that, where there's definitely ways that you can still, you know, have meaningful relationships. You can still hang out with girls. You can still get to know them. Just because we have something where girls or the opposite sex cannot be inside a male or female dorm after 12 or 2, whatever it is, doesn't mean that you can't, you know, have fun and do whatever you want in a relationship because of those time constraints or rules like that.
What do you guys think the implications of DULAC on like same-sex relationships are? Because it seems they're not even acknowledged in that handbook.
I mean, it would be just like the basic Catholic teaching, right? Is that what you mean? Or
I just think it's an interesting concept that it's just an issue, not an issue, but like an idea that's completely ignored in a lifestyle that's kind of disregarded in this like rule of same-sex, or I mean of heterosexual relationships that are kind of being blocked by all these rules.
I think that all students under DULAC, I mean, I know that all students under DULAC and students in the university are called to be in chaste relationships. So those are relationships that respect other people, they're right relationships. It's not separated out by who you're in a relationship with, but it's a matter of whoever you have a relationship with, you are meant to be in a chaste relationship with them. So in a respectful and recognizing the dignity in each other person and making choices that you know, make sense with your belief system. So I think that all students are, I mean, I know that all students are called to that, and that's kind of what we're upholding as a university no matter what. Yeah.
But if like we think that kind of the university's call to chastity is like enough to make students like live according to that, then why is there that extra impediment like kind of set in place? Like, oh, we want everyone to be chaste, like whether they be in a heterosexual or homosexual relationship, but like for everyone who decides to enter in a heterosexual relationship, we have like kind of this extra barrier.
You're talking about what's the extra here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If like going along.
Okay.
And I was
I
just
just
want to say,
like kind of.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify that varietals, I'm not from I don't work for the Office of Community Standards, but it's my understanding of varietals as a rector, that's my role, do not exist to prevent students from engaging in sexual intercourse, because really you could do that Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. in South Carolina, and that would be the choice. That's not, I mean, that's a whole other issue, but that's not what varietals exist, is to not prevent students from engaging in sexual intercourse, but rather it allows for the community to come together as a community and for ideally guests to leave and to allow for the community to come together at the end of the day. And so when you have like your neighbors come over or your family members come over for Thanksgiving or a party, there comes a point in the evening when it's time for everyone to go home and for everyone to kind of end their day and to, you know, go to bed. And that's sort of what violence exists. And as I've observed in my own hall, oftentimes around varietals when everyone actually just tends to go to bed and any guest sort of leaves. I do agree with you that in some ways it alludes to the fact that the conversation about students who might self-identify as gay or lesbian or even bisexual and transgender, that it doesn't take into consideration that there could be a lesbian couple who is in, you know, my women's hall, and I think that that's a great point, and I commend you for bringing that to people's attention. But that's currently why varietals exist, is to create a sense of community and safety and well-being for those who live in that hall, and not to prevent anyone from engaging in sexual intercourse.
So can I throw this is a little random, but it's something, my son went here and lived in Dillon for 4 years, so I spent some time in evenings in Dillon. And my observation, I could be wrong, but my observation is that there's a very strange thing that happens here, and that is, I think it's because women's rectors are stricter than men's rectors, but that men stay in their dorms and dress like they just got back from playing basketball, and women dress in party dresses and makeup and dutied up hair and stilettos and rove around men's dorms in groups of 3, 4, and 5. And I just, first of all, sociologically, it's just interesting. But second of all, it suggests, I mean, even the very question of who has to leave their home to go where in order to have social interactions is an interesting question. Who's on whose territory, and therefore, it suggests power inequalities, actually. Who's on whose territory, and in some sense is more vulnerable, because it's not their home turf. In a way, it's just interesting to think about why Notre Dame is like that, but in a way it raises some very fundamental questions about how, in this case, let's say men and women, relate to each other. What's that rooted in, and what are possibly some of the consequences of that? I just think it's strange that women have got they're dressed completely differently than the men are dressed. The men are sitting around playing video games in couches, and the women are like they're going out to the club.
So
It's weird.
I'm just concerned with sociological. I mean, if you want to take a stab at that, why would that be? Why are the women like migrating to the men?
Why don't the women unionize and say, if you men are interested in us, you come to our flipping doors? But the men get dressed up in suit and ties and come on their knees. I would do that.
A lot of people have things to say, but I just want to say that the sociological research does show that women are more vulnerable, more at risk of sexual assault and negative consequences, whether it's sort of drinking too much and doing more than they would like to have done, perhaps if they were sober, when they are in men's turf. And so women are actually safer on their own turf. So having parties like Nora did is not a bad idea. Like the research actually shows that you're much safer at a sorority party than you are at a fraternity party. But secondly, this is where these ideas about femininity and masculinity from a heteronormative culture come from. We are taught that to be feminine, women need to be attractive to men. And so they get dolled up, and you said they do to their hair or whatever. Okay, do-do. I don't know. Okay, so anyway, women do that because to be seen as feminine, you want to have the male gaze or something. Like, this is just cultural standards. Once again, not saying that women individually buy into it, but they are pressured into this. And men, the way that they are masculine in a heteronormative culture is just to be attracted to women. So you can do that in your basketball shorts, whatever. So Professor Smith is right that it's about power, but he's also right that it's making women more vulnerable, and that the reason that this happens is because of the way that we define sort of what is a good woman and what is a good man. And so a good man, or sort of somebody who's living up to his masculinity, wants to be with women, likes to look at them, and women want, to be a good woman, need to be somebody who a man wants to look at. I don't know where to start. Sure.
Going back to the whole girls only go to guys' dorms and stuff like that, I feel like a lot of women are afraid to have social gatherings and parties or whatever in their dorms, just because kind of culturally that doesn't really happen that much, and that it's because historically when stuff like that goes on in girls' dorms, it usually gets shut down really fast. And so girls feel the need to go to boys' dorms because they feel like they can do stuff there that they can't do in their own dorms. And I totally agree that it poses women being more vulnerable, because when every guy thinks that they live in the best dorm on campus and everyone feels like this is my house, I feel really confident here, and I'm out and I'm the man and I can go get girls here. Where if it was in a girl's own room, then the power would be totally different, because it's this is my room, this is where I live.
It also, if I understand it correctly, it also associates men with being in charge of the alcohol,
Yes.
which is another layer of complexity and power at work here.
Was your question related to this?
Well, yeah, I was just going off of that. Do you think these issues would not be as present here if we had co-ed dorms? Therefore, we wouldn't have this social anxiety, like, oh, like I have to go to the boys' dorm, like, oh, like the guys have to host, like, I don't know, what do you think about that?
When you say quite by floor or like by wing or something like that?
Yeah, like boys and girls living in the same dorm, but like alternated by floors.
Okay, I think people would still be like getting dressed up to go to the guys' rooms for his apartments, you know, just, and depending on the campus too. That because Notre Dame's not a dry campus, so like, I know we're not supposed to have something over like, I don't know, more than beer or wine. Somewhere between 20%, yeah, but you know, there's hard alcohol, you can smell it in the hallways, but, you know, like it's also different too, because you would still be going to the dorms for that gathering. So I think even if it was the co-ed dorm, that you'd still be going, you know, to that other wing or that other floor, or, yeah.
I guess I want to like quickly kind of circle back. Is this, I think from what you're saying at the beginning, Professor Smith, this seems like it's more of a demographic 18 to 24 in this time period problem than it is a, oh, this is a place with single-sex dorms and varietals. You know, so I don't know, I'm misrepresenting that.
I haven't studied lots of college campuses, but I think it's somewhat unique to Notre Dame.
Really?
And I think it's rooted in, as I understand it, it's rooted in women's, what's allowed in the women's dorm to happen is more restrictive than men's, and so things gravitate to the men's dorm.
But you're talking about, Regina, are you talking about picking up?
I'm thinking about just like sort of the idea that dating doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's broadly everywhere.
And gender relations are messed up. You know,
Right,
it's not more,
yes. If anything, Notre Dame would be a little more traditionalist leaning than many places on those broad issues.
Question?
Yeah, and something you said earlier about when people go out looking for meaningful interactions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you said, you know, it's still possible to like have a good talk and like really get to know someone at like a dorm party or a bar or something. But I mean, I know that yes, that's possible, but I'd like to disagree in that you should go out with that intention because if you're going to a dorm party in a small, dark, crowded, loud, sweaty dorm with people packed in centimeters from each other's faces, unable to hear each other, drunk, I don't think that's the right place to look for a meaningful conversation. Like, and this is why, like, I don't go to bars or anything, and like, this is why I kind of hate dorm parties. But I mean, I understand. I definitely agree that it's important to look for meaningful conversation and long beneficial relationships, be them platonic or romantic. But I don't think you should go out to the standard dorm party or fever looking for meaning.
so how do we, how do we shift, this is like a culture shift thing, but how do we change to have it be that instead of going to that room, you know, tiny little room that has an inch of beer on the floor, that we go somewhere that you can talk, and that's the socially acceptable thing to do on Friday.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, if everyone were going into it looking for meaning, it'd be a different story. But everyone's like, oh yeah, let's get fucked up. Like, I mean, like, I'm only disagreeing with half of it.
Yeah. Matt, is your question related to this?
Well, I have a separate question, but also, like, on that, I disagree with that. And that, like, just because you go to a dorm party doesn't mean you have to drink or get drunk. And just because you can go to a dorm party, you can meet people anywhere, really. You know, you could happen to run into your soulmate if maybe it was the first time they went to a dorm party or something crazy like that. I don't know, you can meet people anywhere. So I think, like, being open to, okay, yeah, I'll go to a dorm party every once in a while. Like, obviously that might not be the main place you're looking for meaningful relationships, but I don't know, I think it's a good option to always have an open mind to meeting people anywhere.
Before, do you still have a question?
Yeah, I have a separate question, but I don't know, do you want to like revisit that?
About that really quickly. This is actually where I think social media is good. So the first week of college, I saw this beautiful boy in the cafeteria, and I never saw him again, and I kept trying to find him, and I kept going to the cafeteria at the same time. And I mean, I went through my entire year describing him to people, and I never found him. Okay, and so even if you go to a dorm party where you're squished in together, there's still the potential that if you know that person's name, you can stalk them, you can send them a message, you can do whatever, but like, you know, my son will often just like text some girl, and it's not a big deal, and if she's not interested, she doesn't text back, and this is something that we didn't have. Like, I needed to get to the cafeteria at the same time this guy was there if I was ever going to start anything with him. And so I think that's actually where social even if you're stuck in a dark room together, you can continue the conversation in a safer space where you can get to know each other later, I think. But what's your question?
Oh, my question is, so if you're kind of in between, like let's say you are looking for, a meaningful relationship with someone, I guess you're trying to date someone to, in the long run, get married to them because you don't want to just be in a serious relationship where okay, I'm not going to end up with this person. So where you're in between looking for that one special person, but also trying to, I guess, meet people, would there ever be a time where like hooking up, I guess, would be okay? Not in the terms of just, hooking up all the time, but I don't know, the occasional time where, I don't know, you're tired of being single and lonely for however long, I don't know.
I think what you're referring to is what we would call dating. Like, no, I'm not trying to be like mean. I'm just saying that's isn't that what normal, that's what dating is, going on dates, you're kind of trying to assess the situation, assess the scene. Sometimes it goes to 2 dates, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 1, right? I mean,
that's what I'm saying. That's cool though. It's just to go on a couple dates, whatever, and if nothing goes from there, that's cool.
That's totally okay.
It's exactly what we were talking about earlier, actually. We were talking about how dating has become some sort of, it's become formal almost, whereas if you take a girl or a guy on a date, it's almost become oh, they're your boyfriend or girlfriend, even if it's just the first date. That's the thing, that people hesitate to go on these dates because they're afraid of the formality that comes with it. Just because you take a person on a date doesn't mean that they are your boyfriend or girlfriend. You should, therefore, you should be willing to take a person on a date without those implications, get to know them, and then maybe think about making them your boyfriend or girlfriend. So dating and taking a person on a date, I think.
People think that's the same thing.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to bring up though too.
Oh, I was just gonna echo what you were gonna say, but we kind of
Anyone else? Hands up?
Just rewinding back to when we were talking about the difference equality between men and women and asking people on a date. I know we kind of laughed about dining hall dates, about DHDs, but I think I think for a lot of girls that's kind of a tactic that can be used to make the first move as a girl. I've seen that with different friends of mine, because a lot of girls, especially I feel in the Notre Dame environment, are not comfortable making the first move, and so will use a DHD to kind of try and get to know that person or try to take it to a different level.
That's a really great point. I would do that, Megan. I would say for sure, because I don't know, because we were talking about getting that balance, and you mentioned earlier that you think girls should ask guys out sometimes, which is kind of scary. It can be scary on other sides though, but it is kind of nice to get that step, oh, you got somebody's number, oh, you want to grab dinner tonight, it's chill, and then as you start to hang out more, then maybe he'll take you to the movies or buy you dinner. So yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think that's a great tactic to go to dinner at the dining hall, because there's not as much pressure.
Would it be a good idea that every third Friday of every month, women get to ask men on dates, and the men cannot refuse? I mean, part of what I hear going on here is everything is just sort of hyped up so much that if it could just be ramped down and relaxed and almost institutionalized, then everyone would be happier. Instead of oh my gosh, I just want that. Maybe that's a dumb idea. But.
I want to pick up on what Professor Collins said and kind of what you said about the script, going off script, and how we like to think that everything, if you do this, then this will happen, and then these things will follow, and then everything will be great, and it will be over, we'll check that box off. And that's kind of what I've heard a little bit in yours. It's I'm going to meet somebody, but I'm not going to date them or seriously date them unless I see myself marrying them, right? So it's this idea that there has to be this end game and this goal at the end, and I think that adds that level of
fear to it, because it's like, well, what if I go on 5 dates with this person? Does that mean I have to marry them then? You know, like, do I have to follow this all the way to its end? And I think just kind of shaking that, which I'm sure obviously it's easier said than done, and there's all these social pressures happening, but kind of removing yourself from that mindset and thinking about interacting and having relationships with other people that don't have to follow any kind of script, don't have to reach a goal.
Do you think like things like hip hop night and speed dating like add to this culture of hookups? Because I mean, I don't know, to speeding in like the whole thing behind like hip hop night.
Well, it depends. Well, speed dating, I mean, it's speed dating, so you're going to like meet a bunch of people very quickly. I have been to speed dating at Legends. Go for the experience. Go on. But yes, I mean, I don't remember any of those people's names. You know, like it's like so quick. So I feel like I mean, the purpose of speed dating is to speed date, you know, meet a bunch of people. But I think like hip hop night, it depends. Like while you're in the city, like that can be similar to going to an off-campus party or a dorm party because people like dancing and like, you know, some people are intoxicated. You can go with your girlfriends to dance in a circle and like never talk to a guy if you want, or you can go and like, I don't know, wait for a guy to come dance with you or something. But I guess sometimes it does because I feel like hip hop night can be similar to a party. You could, like, you know, we talked about people like making out on the dance floor and things like that. So I guess it all just really depends. I mean, some people do leave someone from hip hop night to go hook up. I mean, you know, it's all personal preference, I guess.
I would be interested in hearing a little more about opting out, because so far all we've heard about it is people who opt out just because they're so overwhelmed by everything. But like, I totally opted out because I'm just not interested in dating or marriage, period. And Notre Dame is the only place where people immediately ask me, oh, you'll change your mind about that later, or you just haven't met the right person. And I found that it plus the Catholicness of this school seriously like inhibit, I don't have any male friends who I like hang out with because it's been so inhibited by, if I go alone to a male dorm, it's a big deal. And everyone's like, who are you seeing? Who are you interested in? There's no, I would be interested in hearing your opinion on like that, the emphasis on dating here, and how that inhibits male-female relationships, and then maybe even adds to the lack of communication in actual dating.
I really agree with what you're saying. So I was on the freshman orientation staff for Duncan this past year, and one of the things that we tried to emphasize, you know, we serenade other female dorms and stuff like that. The idea is not that you're gonna, you know, get a date from these serenades. The idea is to build lasting relationships. That I don't think that we should necessarily think that every interaction, like you're saying, with the good way the girls are making it seem, has to be a romantic relationship. There can be friendships and stuff like that. Yeah. So when people look at it as if that every interaction that you have with the opposite sex has to be romantic, I think that's incorrect. I think the focus should rather be on forming friendships and relationships. That, you know, I'm going over there to the other guy's dorm, he's a friend, you know, we want to hang out. It's not just because you're interested necessarily, it's because you want to get to know them. You know, it doesn't have to be romantic. It could be platonic.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I think that's a great point too, also, because I have a lot of gay male friends, and I see people, oh, I saw you with that guy earlier, and I was like, he's not interested in me at all. So I know what you mean. That is people like, you know, seeing a guy and a girl together and assume, oh, they're dating, or oh, they must like each other, they're hooking up, whatever. So that is a really interesting point to bring up. But I mean, when you do talk about you go into a guy's dorm and you're walking and people are like, oh, I wonder, you know, whose room she's going into. I mean, I'm kind of a very direct person, so I'll be like, oh, to my guy friends, oh, you want to hang out? Cool, I'm walking over. You know, I don't particularly care. But I know what you mean when that can be difficult when everyone's like watching you or wondering about that too. But I guess in terms of opting out, you know, it just depends. Because, you know, some people are, again, waiting for the right person, or again, just not interested in dating during college or hooking up, and like, it's fine. You know, it's a personal choice. If you don't want to date, no one should force you into dating if you're not ready. So, or just don't want to.
I think there's probably a large group of people, maybe not the majority, but who are similar to you, you know, for whatever reason. Like, they're just not interested in dating, and perhaps they're not interested in sort of marriage in the future. They're not thinking about that now. They're thinking about themselves and what they want to kind of do with their life, etc. But once again, it's kind of these situational pressures. They feel like, oh, I should be interested. You know, all the women in the dorm are talking about the guys that they're into, and then it's like, oh, do I have to kind of pretend that I'm kind of doing this too? And so many people are kind of pretending or get caught up in it, and it's only later that they realize that this wasn't really what they wanted. So, I mean, I think it was part of the panel, and like the title, and like you're saying, we didn't talk so much about it, but I think if more people talked about it, there are people who they just want to hang out with people. And this is a place where actually the single-sex dorms, I think, matter. Because I went to a religious college, but we had co-ed dorms in the sense that on the 5th floor, half was women and half the wall between us. And I was always over on the guy's side, and I had a long-distance boyfriend. I wasn't interested in them. But it was a way that we were kind of like living in the same space, and so it just made sense. And so I do think you have to kind of exert more effort to kind of walk into a boys' fortress or something right here than if we had different kinds of living arrangements.
Actually, I think this is really important, and it's the very concept of effortful, non-romantic relationships. So a lot of the way these categories get defined is romance requires lots of intentionality and planning and scheming and like purposefulness, and then friends just kind of happen. If you make friends, whatever. But if I were, the way I put it is, if I were suddenly became 18 again, but still had what I know and my maturity, I would invest a lot more effort into, this is exactly what's been said, I would invest a lot more effort into non-romantic, significant, serious relationships with same and opposite sex. The kind of people who, for the rest of my life, at reunions, I would love to spend time with. So some people do that with their friends, but I think friends is more, sometimes it's more convenient, and it just sort of happens. But even, it sounds weird to say to make a date with somebody every week, but just more purposefully spend time with a broad variety of people to just get really close to them and get to know them a lot. And maybe one of them someday would turn into something else, but that's not the purpose. So it's expanding the number of possible categories beyond all these romantic categories, and then all this just sort of people you like to be with when it's convenient.
I completely agree. To offer a piece of advice to you, I would say that, maybe don't let the girl discourage you from going to other guys and getting to know other guys. There are a lot of cool guys here, let me tell you. That you should, like Professor Smith said, I think that you should try to form serious relationships with guys that aren't necessarily romantic. Like, go to the dining hall, get lunch with them on a regular basis. I did that just on Monday with one of my friends that's a girl. You try to build a relationship. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. You try and build a platonic relationship, and then, like you said, you expand the possibilities.
It might sound really weird, but I really think some people would appreciate being told, you know what, I really like you. Probably not romantically, but can we just spend time together? Can we on purpose spend time together?
Frankie?
Yeah, I feel like we gain a lot from the opposite sex, just as friends. I know I have girls who are friends that I get lunch with all the time, have classes together with, and I benefit so much from their perspective. They see things that I don't know. They tell me how to do my hair sometimes, and then it helps me in my romantic relationships, like with other girls, and I get that too. I get the oohs and the ahs. Oh, you're seeing that person at the dining hall. Is there anything there? And it's like, no, we're just friends, and you just kind of have to accept. Like, I like how you brought up the word maturity. I think that's a big part of it. A lot of people have this immature understanding of relationships. And I hope that with more talks like this, with people who leave this talk and talk about it in a more like just one-on-one conversational sense with other people, that we keep spreading this awareness that you can have friends and it not be a big deal.
I think a lot of the heart of it comes back down to distinct persons realizing to themselves, I am an acceptable person without everyone affirming that to me immediately. I can be okay with myself without constant others sort of making me feel like I'm acceptable.
Yeah, can I just comment on like what Frankie said?
Sure.
Yeah, I think too, like, it's just, sometimes we do make a huge deal out of things that, I don't know, don't really need to be made a big deal. Like, I mean, like same situation. Like, I met two girls that are like really awesome, and I'm like best friends with them now. So, and I was like over watching a movie in their dorm. But again, people will always think like, oh, are you over there because, you know, like you're trying to like whatever get with one of them? But I think like that's normal. Like, I'm not like, oh, how would you say that? Like, I don't get offended because it's typical. You just have to change that mentality in people's heads where it's totally okay to do that, and just by waving it off like, oh, it's not a big deal to do that, rather than being like, I don't know, making it a big deal makes it seem like it's out of the ordinary. So.
I have one thing that I would like to say. Sorry. One of the things that I've found, I would really like you guys' opinion on this, that in my year here, that girls, so I have groups of friends, they're girls in dorms, and they hang out together in groups of 5 or 6 approximately, and they often, they'll stay in the group and they'll like go to a specific dorm, specific guy's dorm, and they'll only like, it's almost like a clique, to be honest, and they're kind of possessive about their guy group of friends in another dorm, and that they almost don't let other guys get to know them. That, I don't know, this is just my opinion on things, that I think that they're kind of like an exclusive clique. I think a lot of these have been forming around campus.
Are you saying that they won't let other girls get to them, or you said guys? Are you saying that like these groups of girls then sort of like don't let those guys form friendships with the guys in their dorm, or do you mean like any
What I'm
other?
going to say is that I think that because they constantly, every weekend they might go spend time with those guys, that it's kind of hard to develop relationships or friendships with those girls, because they're always spending time with those. They're not necessarily open to, you know, getting to know other guys or other girls for that matter.
Everybody needs a sense of security in their life. It's perfectly human. Too much security, though, is anti-growth. It's just as simple as that. So if people feel the need to have so much control and security of a set of relationships, in the end, it's not going to help them. I guess that's the only thing I'd have to say.
Yeah, but that's why they do that, is because it just makes them feel like, I know these people are safe, you know, I don't need to branch out.
I think that's one thing, kind of to wrap it up, that we can take away from this is getting that sense of security and affirmation from yourself and from what you do on your own time and in the relationships that you have, and being able to have those intentional relationships with friends, people you might be interested in, people you don't realize you're interested in yet, whatever that may be, just interacting with everybody with that intentionality that comes from being solid in yourself. And I know, as your research probably shows, like that's easier said than done, and it comes with age and with growth and with getting out of a world where we live in this kind of community. But I think just even being aware that that is something that can be done is a way to kind of break some of these social norms that have been created here that can be problematic. But let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Definitely continue this with people in your hall, people that weren't here. We did record it, so we'll let